Now go all the way back to when you saw this the last time. When you were in school, sitting in a desk and you were facing the board. It was probably a chalkboard, not these dry erase boards, but I know for some of you it might have been a long time ago and it's hard to remember, but for others it was yesterday. For some of you it was literally yesterday because you are still a teacher and you see the classroom all the time. But go with me here. Think back to your favorite teacher, wherever they stood, whatever they said. Remember how they made you feel, how much they encouraged you, just being you, and gave you the confidence to make it through your day. And it might be your third grade teacher. You might still remember their name, where they lived, the stuff they wore, maybe some of their passions. Might be your high school math teacher. You might have loved your math teacher, or maybe your science teacher. Maybe it was a coach. Maybe you loved this person. Teaching is actually really a thankless job. It's hard work. It's a lot of preparation. Sometimes it's frustrating, but that's actually not why teachers go into teaching. They don't come into the classroom because of the pay or anything like that, those measured rewards like the finances. They actually go because of something that can't be measured. They actually come into a classroom and they actually coach or teach for a lot of other reasons besides the pay. See, teachers wake up every day, they walk through this door, they greet their kids with a smile regardless of what the night before looked like. Teachers come in and they know what they have to do. They know that there are students and young individuals waiting for something to be passed upon, passed down. They're building into a child's life. They're waiting to give that high schooler the high five in the hall. They're waiting to see a smile. That's the reward. See, my fifth grade teacher was really, really great. Mrs. Shinnicky, Madison Elementary. I remember everything. I remember the style of her clothing, the way she kept her hair. But more importantly, I remember the fact that she connected, she cared. Now, all teachers care, but you know your favorite teacher because they just connect with you. We learned about the monetary system. We talked about economies. We actually built one in our classroom and made our own money and had a trading system. We adopted a whale, and we tracked that whale all the way through school, all the way through the school year. But my fifth grade teacher, outside of all that, she would bring her parents in. And her parents would tell us stories of World War II and things like that. So she like offered everything that she was. But more importantly, all of that, Miss Shinnicky cared. I actually was tutored by her after sixth grade. She was still a teacher that I went to throughout the rest of my life and keeping up with. When I had my first kid, I told her about it. But a teacher was there. They speak your language. Your favorite teacher speaks your language. And I think that's what makes a good teacher. Somebody who enters into life, connects with you, and just gets you for you and speaks your language. See, my favorite teacher took time to grow those individual relationships with those 29 students in my fifth grade year. And that didn't stop in the classroom. That lasted for her entire lifetime. Not only did she continue to teach, but she wanted to know how you were doing. She speaks your language. We see Jesus do the same thing when he takes up and he begins to teach publicly for the first time in a synagogue. He picks up the scroll and he begins to teach. In fact, it's recorded this in Mark chapter 1, verse 21. Jesus and his companions went to the town of Capernaum. When the Sabbath day came, he went into a synagogue and began to teach. The people were amazed at his teaching, for he taught with real authority, quite unlike the teachers of the religious law. Jesus went into this synagogue. He picks up the scroll, and it's no big deal to us reading it. The scriptures are full of teachings of Jesus, but this completely individual teaching hits different. They had never heard anything like this. the people that filled the synagogues to be taught, had never heard anything like this, the authority that he speaks with. But the difference is, Jesus is speaking their language. He's connecting with them. It wasn't through the subject matter. It was the individual connection with each and every one that he made. And our favorite teacher didn't matter the subject matter. I still remember the Pythagorean theorem to this day. I've never used it, but my favorite teacher taught it to me. And because she connected to me and spoke my language, 30 years later, I remember it. I'm never going to use it. So whether Jesus is healing or setting people free from a lifetime of pain or fulfilling prophecy, Jesus is connecting to this audience and he's speaking their language.
Jesus taught with real authority, quite unlike the teachers of the religious law. That is a crazy, crazy statement. Sitting here trying to process that. What in the world is Mark actually getting at here? The Hebrew word for authority is actually shemika. It's the same word that we use for ordination, right? Most pastors are ordained, which simply means that a group of people have questioned and tested this individual and they have determined that they are qualified. They have determined that they can speak on behalf of God, that they have the authority to teach the Bible. And we see this process of shemika, authority, ordination throughout the scriptures. I mean, Moses ordained, that's that word shemika. Joshua in Numbers chapter 27, Moses ordained 70 elders who assisted him in governing the Israelite people, Numbers 11. Those elders ordained by Moses then ordained the next level, the next successors, and so on, after they've proven themselves. We see Paul tell Timothy not to ordain people too quickly, that their character will be tested and proven as time passes, a long period before you ordain them. As time passes, these ordained teachers throughout Scripture, they taught only what the community accepted. Their job was to teach, not to change what was being taught. They did not have the authority to change the theological teaching of that day. So their job was not to change the theology taught, not to expound upon the text, but to simply teach the text that had been accepted for generations upon generations. So that's exactly what they did. They regurgitated what had been taught through the generations, and they taught it in the synagogues. But then there's these other rabbis who come along, rabbis like Jesus, and they teach something different, or at least they teach it from a different view. New theological concepts that are based on the same exact passages. And this is why you see Jesus use phrases like, "You have heard it said, but I will tell you." I mean, he does that 6 times in the Sermon on the Mount alone. The establishment, the religious elite has said, this is the way this scripture is interpreted. This is the way that we do things. And Jesus is like, yeah, not so much. We've missed the mark. And so he begins to teach with this shemika, this authority. And the religious elite absolutely freak out. And Matthew records for us that when Jesus went to the temple and began teaching, the leading priests demanded, and I quote, "By what authority are you doing all of this?" Right? Who gave you the right? Who said you can teach this new concept? Because Jesus will not toe the party line. He won't stay within the boundaries. He colors outside of the line of the established religious elite of Judaism. And so they're not the ones giving him his authority. And so they want to know, who ordained you? Where did your shemika, where did your authority come from? That is actually a theme that we see through all 4 Gospels. through the life of Jesus? Who gave you the authority to say that? Because their power is threatened. They are being intimidated. Their influence is actually lowering, and that scares them. See, it's important to remember that as Jesus brings this new understanding, he's not actually changing the Bible. He's not doing away with the Old Testament. In fact, in his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, "Don't think I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish them. I actually came to fulfill them." And so as Jesus is teaching, he's actually bringing people back to the point of the law, what God intended originally as he wrote these words, because the religion of Judaism had gotten off track. They had made the point about keeping the law. They had made the point of a relationship with God about religious duty. They made the point that a relationship with God is simply about following the rules. It was about obedience, not about their hearts. And a good teacher is never about obedience, it's always about their hearts. Which is why when Jesus says, "You have heard it said, but I tell you," that's what he's doing. He's moving from the letter of the law to the motivation of our hearts. Let me just give you one quick example out of Matthew, out of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus says, "You have heard it said that you must not commit adultery. But I say to you, anyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart." See, it goes well beyond the rules, Jesus says. It's going beyond the letter of the law. It's actually going to what rules your heart. That it isn't about keeping the rule as much as it making sure your heart is in the right place. And once my heart is in the right place, I don't need a rule, because I'll actually already be doing the right thing. And that's something religion cannot handle. It cannot stand. Did you realize that religion simply does not trust people? So it has to give people a rule to follow. They don't care about the heart as long as you are obeying the rule. And that's religion. That's also why Jesus just can't stand religion. Unfortunately, most of modern Christianity is doing exactly the same thing. We've gotten off track. We've made the point about following the rules, being obedient, listening to the right kind of music, dressing in the right ways. And did you realize that rules without a relationship will always end in rebellion? That's what I love about Jesus. He's always about people's hearts. Good teachers are always about their people's hearts. And people know when authority is after your heart, and people know when authority is just simply after obedience. See, when you and I think about authority, when we think of Shemekia, we naturally gravitate to images of a person or an organization that forces us to do something, usually against our will. That you better obey the speed limit, you better pay your taxes, whatever. It's not that we want to do it, it's that we have to do it. And if we don't do it, then the authority will make us pay. Authority will punish us. And so that is the image that most people have of our God, because that is the image of religion. You better believe in Jesus or you're going to hell. You better dress this way and do this or you're going to hell. And it's no wonder that people don't want anything to do with God, because he has been so communicated poorly. That's not our God. And that's why the people in this audience that Jesus is speaking to are so blown away by Jesus. They're like, this is unlike anything I have ever heard before. His teaching is so powerful. He teaches with such Shemekia, such authority, because he loves the people first. And people know when they are being loved. And when they're being loved, then they're open to listening. They can actually feel it. You know when someone has your best interest at heart, and when someone has your best interest at heart, Well, we have a tendency to listen. And so he speaks to the heart, not calling for their obedience. He's calling for their heart to follow. And when their hearts follow, then their lifestyle follows. And so he's not using his authority to force people to do his will. He's just simply showing them that there's wisdom in following his authority, his will. And so they embrace it. They're moved by it. And their lives are changed because he's going after their hearts.
When I was in high school, I had a teacher that I couldn't stand. And I think it's probably not kosher or Christian to say that I hated her, but it was pretty darn close. And she knew that I didn't like her, and I thought she didn't like me. I felt like she was always on my case. She always was just telling me what to do. She was always calling me out for my behavior. And as a 17-year-old, I looked at her as someone who I wished would just mind her own business. I did not like her when I was her student. But as an adult, I've realized that she actually told me what I didn't want to hear because she cared about me. She loved me. And she spoke to me with real authority out of love and compassion for me. Her motivation for correcting me wasn't because she was on a power trip or wasn't because she was trying to show how strong she was or how powerful she was or lord her authority over me. She corrected me because she actually believed in me. She knew that I had potential. In hindsight, when I think back on this teacher, I realized that I needed somebody who believed in me that way. I needed a person in my life who spoke truth to me. Not just to be my friend and not just to be my teacher. I needed someone to give me direction. We all have opportunities to connect with people in our lives. God has placed us in positions of power and authority over somebody. It doesn't matter who you are, you have influence over people. But the marker of somebody who uses authority wisely is somebody who uses their authority to benefit others. When I was a kid and my mom would often say, when I asked her why I had to do something, she would often say, because I said so. It's probably something your parents said to you as well. But Jesus doesn't say, because I said so. Jesus says, because I love you. I'm asking you to do these things because I love you. And I love it when Mark says that Jesus taught with real authority, quite unlike the teachers of the religious law. I believe that those people probably spoke with authority, but it wasn't real authority. Jesus' authority is different. And I want you to just think about those words, real authority. I want you to think about the power your words wield. The things that you say have power and influence over other people. We've all been in situations where somebody has spoken to us unkindly or said things to us that have made us feel less than who we are. But you have authority over your words. And so my challenge, my charge to you is to think and process, how do I use my words and what's my motivation for my words? Is it because I want to show somebody how much control I have over them or over a situation? Or do I want to show them how much I love them and care about them? So this week, as you are thinking about what we've taught, I would challenge you to embrace your authority, not to shy away from it, but to say that I do have influence, but how I use that influence is the most important thing. Think about the words that you say and why you say those words. What's your motivation for the things that you do?